National Economic Council suspends planned removal of petrol subsidy by the end of President Muhammadu Buhari's administration. In Osun State, court reserves judgment in case of alleged murder of OAU master student Timothy Adegoke. Federal government says the first batch of stranded Nigerians evacuated from Sudan will arrive in Abuja tomorrow. And on the foreign scene, Sudanese army attacks paramilitaries as fragile ceasefire enters final hours. Good evening. This is News at 7 on Western Spring Television. My name is Femi Olanikpekun. The National Economic Council has suspended the planned removal of a subsidy on petroleum products by the end of President Muhammadu Buhari's administration. Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning Zainab Hamid disclosed these while briefing State House correspondents at the end of the NEC meeting presided over by the Vice President Yemi Osinbajo at the Presidential Villa, Abuja. According to the minister, the NEC concluded that it is not a favorable time for the action. She stated that the council equally agreed on the need to continue the discussion on the matter and the necessary preparatory work in conjunction with states and representatives of the incoming administration. She explained that the removal of the subsidy will likely take effect in June because the Petroleum Industry Act and the 2023 budget provided subsidy till June. Hence, any delay may require the amendment of the PIA and budget provisions. Mrs. Hamid, however, said that there was no deadline given for the subsidy removal and that the incoming administration will take decision on when possible to do that. And to legal matters, the Supreme Court has granted leave to the federal government to bring 9 new grounds of appeal against the release of pro-Biafra agitator Nnamdi Kanu. A 5-member panel led by Justice John Okoro granted the leave today while ruling on the motion by the Council to the federal government. The Apex Court also granted leave to the federal government to include the 9 new grounds as part of its amended notice of appeal dated 28 October 2022. The court subsequently fixed May 11th for the hearing of the suit.
Argue for a stay of execution, and the Court of Appeal granted that stay of execution. So the court was staying the execution of the liberty of a citizen, which the same court had already told to go free. So we filed an appeal against that order for stay of execution and also cross-appeal against their main appeal. These things have been going on since October. What will the federal government, what do they normally do? They will file documents at the Supreme Court here. They will undertake to serve us, the respondent. They will hide the document. They will not serve us. They did that in November last year. It was when we went to the court in January this year to try to facilitate the hearing of the appeal that we discovered.
Here in Osun State, the High Court in Osogbo, presided over by Justice Oyebola Ojo, has reserved judgment on the case of Hilton Hotel owner Rahman Adedoyin and 6 staff over alleged murder of master students of Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, Timothy Adegoke. Justice Ojo reserved judgment today after the adoption of final written addresses from the Prosecution and Defense Counsel. Dr. Adedoyin with 6 of his staff, Magdalene Chefuna, Adeniyi Aderogba, Oluwole Lawrence, Oyetunde Kazeem, Adebayo Kunle, and Adedeji Adeshola are standing trial on 18 counts bordering on conspiracy, murder, and felony.
The case involving Hilton Hotel owner Ramon Adedoyin and 6 of his employees was earlier closed in February following the absence of the counsel to the 7th defendant who was to testify in court. When the matter came up today for presentation of fresh applications, the defense counsel, Yusuf Ali, Roland Otaru and Murtala Abdurrashid prayed the court to declare null and void the appearances, applications and other legal activities of the prosecuting counsel, Femi Falana, for failing to get an approval from the Attorney General of the state to prosecute the case. Meanwhile, when the presiding judge, Justice Oyebola Ojo, asked the defense counsel what becomes of the trial if Mr. Falana's case are declared null and void, the counsel to the defendant stated that the defense team will apply wisdom. Speaking outside the court, the defense counsel, who argued that Mr. Falana lacks the right to prosecute the case, further asked the court to discharge and acquit all the defendants.
What transpired is that we raised preliminary objection to the appearance of Falana, SAN, and his other colleagues in chambers, that he has no fiant. The Attorney General for Osun State did not give him any fiant to appear or to prosecute this case. And so it's a very fundamental issue which touches on the jurisdiction of the court to hear him. Because especially the letter he wrote on the 4th day of February 2022 to the Inspector General of Police, acting for the family of the deceased. So he cannot ask for the family of the deceased and at the same time ostensibly coming to court to prosecute that case without a fiant. And he did not show any to the court. And the court confirmed sometimes on the 25th of April last year that, was it last year? Yeah, last year, that he ought to have brought the fiant so that the court can see it. Since he has no fiant, he has no locus standi to prosecute the state on behalf of the Honorable Attorney General of Osun State. We adopted our final written addresses and we told the court that all the defendants should be discharged and acquitted because they did not prove all the ingredients of the offenses or that which they be charged. And as we made the submission that a criminal trial is sui generis. A criminal trial of this nature is sui generis because it must be proved beyond reasonable doubt, and they have failed woefully to do that.
However, Mr. Falana, who confirmed that he did not present letter of approval to prosecute the case to the court, argued that the defendant had no right to question the authority of the Attorney General in prosecuting the case. Mr. Falana also said the implication of the defense application is that the trial may have to start afresh, a situation that he maintained may not be fair on the defendant, who had been in prison since last year.
So the first to the sixth defendant challenged my locus standi in the case, to appear in the case, particularly to conduct the case from the 25th of April to the present. We addressed the court on it, and I also challenged them their competence to question the authority of the Attorney General for me to conduct this case. But I also pointed out to the court the implication of the application, which is that if the proceedings where I participated are set aside, that means the case will have to, the defendant will have to be called to start their defense all over. In other words, if the judge directs the police prosecutor or directs the Attorney General to appoint another lawyer to take over from my position. And that is why I said it will not be fair to the court, the defendants, and the counsel. So the court will deliver a composite judgment on that point when it's going to deliver the main case. But we also address the court on the case itself, while the defendants counsel asks the court to discharge and acquit their clients. We urge the court to convict in line with the evidence laid in court. So that's what happened today.
Timothy Adegoke was allegedly murdered in Mr. Adedoyin's hotel last year when he lodged in the hotel to sit for an examination at the OAU campus, after which series of investigations have been carried out following his death. Toby Sanusi, Western Spring Television News.
An Osun State High Court sitting in Oshogbo has fixed the 2nd of May 2023 to rule on an application seeking to set aside a People's Democratic Party PDP ward and local government congresses conducted on the 18th and 19th of April 2023. The application filed by 8 members of the party led by Chief Segun Odekunmi against the PDP and its caretaker chairman Akindele Adekunle was heard today by Justice Ayo Oyebiyi. Justice Oyebiyi had earlier restrained the PDP from forging ahead with the conduct of the proposed congresses pending the determination of a suit before the court, bordering on the suspension of the PDP members. At today's hearing, counsel to the plaintiffs, Kehinde Adesina, said he had filed an application seeking a reversal of all actions carried out by the PDP in contempt of the earlier court order. He said the plaintiffs attempted to participate in the congresses but were denied the opportunity due to their earlier suspension from the PDP. On his part, counsel to the defendants, Hashim Abioye, said that the suit borders on the internal affairs of the PDP, which the court does not have jurisdiction to rule on. He urged that the application should be thrown out. While addressing journalists outside the court, counsel to the plaintiffs, Edmond Biriomoni and Kehinde Adesina, said contempt proceedings have commenced against the defendants, while the defense counsel, Hashim Abioye, insisted that the court does not have jurisdiction to entertain the matter.
The counsels, both counsels for the plaintiffs and the defendants were in court. They made an application to set aside the order earlier granted on the 6th. The court refused. Curiously, with the same impunity, they went ahead the following day, on the 18th, to conduct the World Congress in the 118 wards. And on the 19th, they did the same thing for the local government. And we felt that this impunity has gone too far. We cannot sit back and watch the judiciary being trampled upon. We certainly need to uphold the sanctity of all those chambers of the court, of the judiciary. And that was what we did. What we did was to file an application for setting aside the World Congress, the local government congress, and the state, not the World and the local government congress, because as at the time we filed, the state congress had not been conducted. And they've responded. And what happened in court this morning is that the court, in its wisdom, decided to take both applications. The motion on notice earlier filed for interlocutory injunction, and the latter one for setting aside the World Congress and the local government congress.
And the matter in court is about their suspension, and they're asking the court for the court to restore them as full members. That is their prayer before the court. So, but in their characteristic manner, like they did in the past, so they filed an application when they felt that the Congress was fast approaching, after due notice had been given to INEC, and the Congress was about holding the filed application before the court to restrain the conduct of congresses. So, and that is why we are before the court, that the court cannot do that, and we have filed necessary application before the court. Principally, we are saying that the court does not have jurisdiction to look into the processes, because those processes question the leadership and membership of the first defendant, that is the PDP. And the Supreme Court has said that the issue of leadership and membership of a political party is a no-go area.
Elsewhere, Senator representing Kogi West Senatorial District, Smart Adeyemi, and the son of former governor of Kogi State, Shuaibu Abubakar, and 3 others are demanding the immediate cancellation of the All Progressives Congress APC primary for the selection of the party's candidate in a forthcoming governorship election. In a suit, they asked the courts to declare as illegal and unlawful the purported direct primary election said to have been conducted by the APC, which produced Ahmed Ododo as the governorship candidate. He also asked the courts for an order compelling the Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC) to reject and refuse recognition of Mr. Ododo as APC's governorship candidate on the grounds that he emerged from an invalid primary election. The aggrieved governorship aspirants prayed for another order compelling APC to conduct a fresh primary election and give all aspirants equal opportunity as prescribed by the Electoral Act 2022. Separately, they called on President Muhammadu Buhari, the President-elect Bola Tinubu, his vice, and the Arewa Consultative Forum to intervene in order to save democracy in Kogi State. And to security, President Muhammadu Buhari says the fighting power of the Nigerian army has progressively increased since his administration began in 2015. President Buhari made this known at the Nigerian Army Parade of Trooping and Presentation of Colors at Eagle Square, Abuja, noting that the army is one of the strongest in Africa today. He said that the fighting power of the army was at its lowest ebb as of May 2015, but 7 years later, its fighting power has increased significantly, making it fourth in Africa. President Buhari also unveiled 28 out of the 81 national and regimental colours for the newly established and operationalized unit and retired unit colours of the Nigerian Army.
Since the last trooping and presentation of Colors Parade in 2007, new units have been established and operationalized in line with the increasing operational commitments of our Army. Additionally, existing colors have been extensively involved in multiple operations in various geopolitical zones of the country, as well as foreign countries, hence deserving of retirement. Today's ceremony is a continuation of our effort to reinvigorate the fighting spirit of our troops through the inculcation of greater pride in their units. The nation's security situation was greatly challenged by the activities of violent non-state actors. Today, I am pleased to specifically note that the situation has tremendously improved, and I wish to also proudly highlight that we have made remarkable progress.
In the meantime, amidst persisting terror activities in the Northeast, the chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, Abdulrasheed Bawa, has reiterated the Commission's readiness to revoke the registration of any NGO operating in the region found to have a link with any terrorist group. Mr. Bawa was speaking at the opening of a one-day workshop on economic and financial crime reporting in Maiduguri today. Speaking through the Maiduguri Zonal Commander of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, Oshodi Johnson, he cited the case of Aisha Wakil, alias Mama Boko Haram, who was investigated by the Commission and prosecuted and convicted for using her NGO for fraudulent purposes. Mr. Bawa charged journalists in the region to investigate whether NGOs in the region comply with the Terrorism Act in their operations. And staying with security, the Inspector General of Police, Usman Baba, has ordered the deployment of 12 commissioners of police to various state commands across the country. That this follows the approval of Mr. Baba's recommendation by the Police Service Commission. A statement by the First Public Relations Officer, Olumuyiwa Adejobi, said the IGP also tasked the senior police officers to proceed immediately to the respective duty post, take charge of the affairs of their offices, and execute the policing agenda of the NPF's leadership. He urged them to adequately ingrain community-oriented policing in their various jurisdictions to achieve modern technology-based and people-oriented policing services on all fronts. Many Nigerians are reportedly stranded on the journey from Sudan's capital Khartoum to Cairo in Egypt after drivers of the buses paid to evacuate them complained that they ran out of fuel and that the federal government has not remunerated them for their service. The evacuation of 2,400 students and other Nigerians trapped by the ongoing conflict in Sudan took off yesterday, with only 15 out of the 40 buses required for the exercise provided. This is despite claims by the federal government that it hired 40 buses for the repatriation of the citizens from Khartoum and other cities to Egypt. In a video posted online, the students were seen crying and lamenting that they do not have water and food. While reacting to the video, chairperson of the Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, Abike Dabiri-Rewa, said the evacuation process was a tedious one and the challenges were expected. She later revealed that the issue has been resolved, adding that the first batch of stranded Nigerians will arrive in Abuja tomorrow.
Before we started this journey, we have to go on several fighting. Can you imagine that we are stuck in this desert for 5 hours?
You're watching News at 7 and Western Spring Television is still to come. Sudanese army attacks paramilitaries as fragile ceasefire enters final hours. We'll bring you more on these when we return. Please do stay with us.
At birth, but globally known as Mao Zedong, he was a Chinese revolutionary and founder, People's Republic of China, which he led as chairman of the Chinese Communist Party from 1949 until his death in 1976. He was a communist who believed in the attainment of power by the instrumentality of gun. His wise saying, "Political power grows out of the barrel of gun," formed the major plank of his revolutionary struggle for the control of China. In the long span of his leadership and political power, Mao Zedong relentlessly entrenched the communist philosophy in China, which emphasized the revolutionary struggle of the vast majority of people against the exploiting class and their state structures. The communist leaders defined the class struggle as people's war. Mao Zedong was a story of grace to grace, having risen from peasantry to preeminent status as China's most respected leader. Western Spring Television identifies Mao Zedong as a major character in history. The Korean War of 1950 to 1953 pitched North and South Korea against each other in response to intrigues by nations beyond their border with different interests from those canvassed by the two brother nations. The Korean War had all the nuances of an external conflict induced by powers that were interested in subjugating North and South Korea. Japan had leveraged on its military power to annex Korea in 1900 and imposed a military union that did not sit well with the citizens. Japan not only lost its war of conquest against Korea, all its powers were obliterated by the effect of the World War II. The end of World War II got Korea divided into two nations along 38 parallel lines by the instrumentality of the United States of America and the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic. The Korean War lapsed into a Cold War when it stopped the prying eyes of external forces into the internal affairs of a nation now divided along its north and southern territories. Western Spring Television identifies the Korean War as a major event in history. Ahmadu Bello, a Prince Royal, was born 6th of December 1910 at Raba Village, Sokoto, northwestern Nigeria. His father was a district head and heir apparent to the Sultanate throne from the house of Usmanu Danfodio, a religious and social reformer who brought the Habib dynasty under the Fulani Caliphate in the beginning of the 19th century. Ahmadu Bello raised the bar of political consciousness and participation when, in 1944, he engineered the establishment of the Northern People's Congress (NPC) as the first political party in northern Nigeria and the rallying point for politicians in the region before independence. History will not forget Ahmadu Bello for his charisma and political sagacity, which provided easy passage for his kinsmen to assume political and administrative positions in Nigeria's post-independence era. The distinguished elder statesman and Sardauna of Sokoto has his face on his country's 200 naira currency as a mark of honor to one of the architects of Nigeria's independence. Western Spring Television identifies Ahmadu Bello as a watershed character in history.
Welcome back, and this is still News at 7 on Western Spring Television. A reminder of our headlines. National Economic Council suspends planned removal of petrol subsidy by the end of President Muhammadu Buhari's administration. In Osun State, court reserves judgment in case of alleged murder of OAU master student Timothy Adegoke. And federal government says the first batch of stranded Nigerians evacuated from Sudan will arrive in Abuja tomorrow. And the foreign Sudanese army attacks paramilitaries as fragile ceasefire enters final hours. Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice Abubakar Malami has appeared before a House of Representatives ad hoc committee investigating the alleged illegal sale of 48 million barrels of crude oil in 2015. The committee summoned Mr. Malami over the alleged involvement of his office and the sale of the product, but he ignored the invitations. In speaking today, the Attorney General said the purported sale of the product was baseless and unfounded. The minister said there was no substance in the whistleblower reports that propelled the investigation by the ad hoc committee. And Mr. Malami also denied receiving funds through the whistleblower policy, which he did not remit to the government. The committee had said it obtained reports that the minister recovered funds through the policy without remitting them to the Federation account. But Mr. Malami told the committee that his office does not receive funds on behalf of the government, noting that the Ministry of Finance that coordinates the policy and makes all payments to whistleblowers. In the meantime, the Senate is seeking to repeal and reenact the Nigeria Atomic Energy Commission law to enable the country to enhance sustainable national development. Speaking at the opening of a public hearing by the Senate Committee on Science and Technology, Senator Uche Ekwenife said the bill would aid the robust implementation of the National Nuclear Program in line with acceptable international standards. Senator Ekwenife, who is the chairperson of the committee, said the bill would establish the Nigerian Nuclear Waste Management Company to manage issues relating to radioactive waste. She also said the bill seeking to establish Nigerian content and programs contract, science, engineering, technology, and innovation will promote local content. On his part, President of the Petroleum and Natural Gas Senior Staff Association of Nigeria, Pengasan, Festus Osifo, said the committee should ensure that there is no duplication of functions. Pan-Yoruba socio-political organization Afenifere has called on the federal government to discontinue all the plans and arrangements to conduct the forthcoming National Housing and Population Census. The group bemoaned the timing of the national exercise, which is scheduled to commence on May 3rd, saying its credible implementation would be impossible. This was contained in a communique at the end of its monthly meeting held at the residence of the Afenifere's acting leader, Pa Ayo Adebanjo in Ogun State. According to the organization, some stakeholders have raised concerns about conducting the census in the same year as a general election. The government insisted in conducting the census. The group also condemned the 100 billion naira planned cost of the exercise, describing it as a scandalous and economic offense. On the foreign scene, the Sudanese army attacked paramilitaries in the capital Khartoum with airstrikes today, while deadly fighting fled in Darfur as a fragile U.S.-brokered ceasefire entered its final hours. Ahead of the expiry of the three-day truce at midnight, the army said it had agreed to talks in neighboring South Sudan on extending aid at the initiative of the East African Regional Bloc, IGAD. There have been multiple truce efforts since fighting broke out on April 15th between Sudan's army, led by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, and the paramilitary rapid support forces commanded by his deputy-turned-rival, Mohamed Hamdan Daglo. The fighting has continued despite the U.S.-brokered ceasefire that took effect on Tuesday, with warplanes patrolling the skies over the capital's northern suburbs as fighters on the ground exchange artillery and heavy machine gun fire. According to the health ministry figures, at least 512 people have been killed and 4,193 wounded in the fighting, although the real death toll is likely much higher.
Sudan's army has expressed willingness to extend a shaky ceasefire for a further 72 hours amid continuing battles with the rival paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, RSF, on the outskirts of the capital, Khartoum. The army said late on Wednesday that its leader, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, had given initial approval to a plan to extend the truce due to expire late on Thursday for another 72 hours and send an army envoy to Juba, the South Sudan capital, for talks. People in Khartoum and Omdurman are finding it difficult to find clean water, food and access to cash. Explosions and gunfire could still be heard on Wednesday, with warplanes in the air, although it was quieter than before the ceasefire and the situation was good enough for evacuations to continue. United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken and African Union Commission Chairperson Moussa Faki Mohammed have also discussed ways to work together to end the fighting in Sudan, the U.S. State Department said in a statement on Wednesday. Some of the heaviest battles on Wednesday were in Omdurman, a city on the northern edge of Khartoum, where the army was fighting RSF reinforcements from other regions of Sudan. The World Health Organization, WHO, expects many more deaths in Sudan due to outbreaks of disease and a lack of essential services amid fighting, its Director General said on Wednesday.
WHO expects there will be many more deaths due to outbreaks, lack of access to food and water, and disruptions to essential health services, including immunization. WHO estimates that 1/4 of the lives lost so far could have been saved with access to basic hemorrhage control. But paramedics, nurses, and doctors are unable to access injured civilians, and civilians are unable to access services.
Battles between Sudan's army and the Rapid Support Forces, RSF paramilitary, since mid-April has killed at least 459 people and injured more than 4,000, according to the WHO. According to Mike Ryan, head of WHO's Health Emergencies Program, the absence of clean water and vaccines, as well as other sanitation issues, represented the main risk to the Sudanese.
When lab workers are forced to leave a laboratory and untrained people enter that laboratory, there are always risks. But the risks are primarily to those individuals, first and foremost, to accidentally expose themselves to the pathogen. But right now, the vast majority of people who have been infected with infectious diseases in Sudan are doing so because they're having to drink dirty water.
Several countries have evacuated their nationals since the ceasefire took hold. A boat evacuating more than 1,600 people from dozens of countries arrived in Saudi Arabia on Wednesday, and both Germany and France say all their citizens have now left the country. Some 536 British nationals have been evacuated from Sudan on 6 flights, the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office said. The federal government has confirmed the commencement of evacuation of Nigerians stranded in Sudan. This was also confirmed by the chairman of the Nigerians and Diaspora Commission, Abike Dabiri Erewa. The NIDCAM boss disclosed that the students were being put on buses according to their states of origin for ease of conveyance to their states of origin. Minister of Foreign Affairs Jeffrey Onyema revealed that 40 luxury buses were made available in Sudan to pick up Nigerian nationals in the country to Egypt, where they would be airlifted back home. Minister of State Zubairu Dada noted that the Saudi Arabia government had already evacuated some Nigerians through the sea to safety, and once the situation calms down, arrangements would be made to move them back to Nigeria. It is believed there could be up to 5,000 Nigerians living in Sudan, and that 3,500 of them are students. Temi Tekbe, Ajijola Oluwaola, Western Spring Television.
To the Russia-Ukraine war, NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg says the alliance and its partners have provided Ukraine with 1,550 armored vehicles and 230 tanks. Mr. Stoltenberg said the alliance has trained and equipped more than 9 new Ukrainian armored brigades, adding that these will put Kyiv in a strong position to retake its occupied territory. He warned that NATO must never underestimate Russia, adding that the alliance's summit in Lithuania would set out plans for a multi-year program of support for Ukraine. Mr. Stoltenberg further welcomed the call between China's President Xi Jinping and Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky.
Ukraine with what it needs to prevail. I thank Luxembourg for your generous contributions to NATO's Ukraine Fund. This is providing urgent support, including medical supplies, mobile satellite systems, and pontoon bridges. Overall, through the contact group led by the United States, NATO allies and partners have provided unprecedented support to Ukraine. More than 98% of the combat vehicles promised to Ukraine have already been delivered. That means over 1,550 armored vehicles, 230 tanks and other equipment, including vast amounts of ammunition. In total, we have trained and equipped more than 9 new Ukrainian armored brigades. This will put Ukraine in a strong position to continue to retake occupied territory.
Meanwhile, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has revealed that at least 1 person was killed and 23 others were wounded in a Russian missile strike in Mykolaiv today. Ukrainian officials said Russia bombarded Mykolaiv with 4-caliber missiles launched from the Black Sea. According to them, their high-precision weapons were aimed at private houses, a historic building, and a high-rise building. Kyiv Regional Governor Vitaly Kim said emergency services put out several fires caused by the missile debris. The General Staff of Ukraine's armed forces said fighting gripped Bakhmut and nearby areas after Russian troops had failed to advance on 2 villages to the northwest. In the United Kingdom, a judge has cut short the forthcoming strike in England by members of the Royal College of Nursing by a day. The walkout was due to start on Sunday and was going to last until Tuesday. The judge ordered that the nurses' strike must now end on Monday, as a 6-month notice it's issued ends on Monday. UK Health Secretary Steve Barclay, who took the RCN to the High Court, welcomed the decision, adding that government would not stand by and let unlawful strike action go ahead. Meanwhile, the RCN General Secretary Pat Collin, who spoke outside the court, said the action of the Health Secretary has lost him the public.
Steve Barclay may get a legal win today, but what he has done is he has lost the public and he has certainly lost nursing. So he has a short-term gain, but long-term there's no trust whatsoever from any of our nursing staff now in this government, and certainly the public.
And still ahead, the United Nations says large-scale oil theft and recent scarcity crippled Nigeria's economy and strained finances. We have more on these and other business stories after this break. Please do stay with us.
Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela was an anti-apartheid activist who gave his all for the elimination of what has been described as the world's most vicious rule of the unjust and man's inhumanity against man. He was born July 18, 1918 in Mvezo, South Africa. Educated and trained as a successful legal practitioner, he took up the gauntlet of a human activist against segregation by the minority white suprematists in South Africa. At the climax of his trial for treason, orchestrated by the minority South African government, the great crusader for democratic equality was prepared to pay the supreme sacrifice to establish majority rule in his native land. He told white jurists that if achieving freedom for his people was worth his life, he was prepared to die. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in Robben Island, described as the most notorious prison in the world. It was from this same prison that he came out as a free man to assume office as South Africa's first black president in 1994. Western Spring Television identifies Nelson Mandela as a watershed character in history. Born 16th September 1923, named Harry Lee Kuan and known as Lee Kuan Yew, he was often addressed by his initials of LKY. Lee Kuan Yew was a barrister and the first Prime Minister of Singapore between 1959 and 1990. Educated at Raffles Institution from 1936 to 1940 and the Fitzwilliam House between 1947 and 1949, Lee Kuan Yew established a highly effective and anti-corrupt governance system that midwives the transformation of Singapore into a high net worth income economy within a generation. He never hid his exception to Western mode democratic ideal, which he believed had not assisted developing nations to attain good government. Before his death on 23rd March 2015, the People's Action Party, which he founded, had used its political influence to establish the United World College of Southeast Asia to expand his economic ideas among countries that constitute the Asian Tiger. Western Spring Television identifies Lee Kuan Yew as a major character in history. Born Jeremiah Oyeni Obafemi on March 6, 1905, Obafemi Awolowo was a prime architect of Nigeria's independence and most consummate advocate of free education and social welfare in Africa's most populous nation. Erudite politician, thinker and philosopher, Awo was fondly addressed by associates and political colleagues, brought his unique attributes to bear on governance in the defunct Western region. He administered as leader of government business and the premier between 1955 and 1958. Obafemi Awolowo's premiership witnessed pioneering in multi-sectoral policy initiatives and execution. The Western region under his administration paraded several enviable records. First television station in Africa, first real estate in Nigeria, first high-rise building in Nigeria, first modern sports stadium in Nigeria, first agricultural settlement in Nigeria, first modern civil service secretariat in Nigeria, and first industrial estate in Nigeria. His face is on 100 Naira denomination as a mark of honor for his distinguished services to his country. Western Spring Television identifies Obafemi Awolowo as a major character in history.
Welcome back, and now to business. The Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited says it has signed a memorandum of understanding with a Norwegian company, Golar Liquefied Natural Gas Energy, to build a floating LNG plant in Nigeria. The National Oil Company made this known in a tweet. NNPC said its Group Chief Executive Officer, Mele Kyari, and Chief Executive Officer of Golar LNG, Carl Frederick, signed the agreement in Abuja. According to the NNPC, Golar LNG is one of the world's largest independent owners and operators of marine-based LNG midstream infrastructure that is active in the liquefaction, transportation, and regasification of natural gas. Meanwhile, the United Nations says the large-scale oil theft and recent scarcity crippled the Nigerian economy and strained finances. In a new report, the Intergovernmental Organization said the scarcity affected the informal sector the most. The report was produced by the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, an arm of the United Nations that promotes the interest of developing countries in world trade. The UN also projected that the general African economy will expand by 2.5%, which is a drop from last year and at a pace insufficient to make a dent in poverty levels. Like in other developing regions, the UN report explains that weaker external demand and tighter financial conditions have made growth prospects gloomier for the region. The United Nations also said with half of African countries recording double-digit inflation in early 2023, many are at risk of a slump in 2023. Meanwhile, the Meanwhile, the United Nations says large-scale oil thefts and the recent cash scarcity crippled the Nigerian economy and strained finances. In a new report, the Intergovernmental Organization said the scarcity affected the informal sector the most. The report was produced by the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, an arm of the United Nations that promotes the interest of developing countries in world trade. The UN also projected that the general African economy will expand by 2.5%, which is a drop from last year, and at a pace insufficient to make a dent in poverty levels. Argentina will start to pay for Chinese imports in yuan rather than dollars, a measure that aims to relieve the country's dwindling dollar reserves. According to government officials, in April, Buenos Aires aims to pay around $1 billion of Chinese imports in yuan instead of the dollars, and thereafter about $790 million of monthly imports will be paid in yuan. Argentina's Economy Minister Sergio Massa said this during an event following a meeting with the Chinese ambassador Zhou Shuali, noting that the decision aims to ease the outflow of dollars. The decision comes as the South American nation battles critical levels in its dollar reserves amidst a sharp drop in agricultural exports caused by historic drought as well as political uncertainty ahead of the elections this year. In the United States, the House of Representatives narrowly passed a bill to raise the government's $31.4 trillion debt ceiling, which includes sweeping spending cuts over the next decade. The bill is not expected to pass the Senate, and President Joe Biden is expected to veto it if it did. But mostly partisan 217 to 215 votes represents a win for the Republican House Speaker, Kevin McCarthy. Mr. McCarthy hopes to lure President Biden into negotiations on cutting spending, even as the White House and congressional Democrats insist on a debt limit increase with no strings attached. The U.S. Treasury Department could run out of ways to pay its bills in a matter of weeks if Congress fails to act.
The sad part here is now the Democrats need to do their job. The president can no longer ignore by not negotiating. Senator Schumer, if he thinks he's got a plan, put it on the floor. See if you can pass it, and then we can go to conference. But now, the president can no longer put this economy in jeopardy. We lifted the debt limit. We've sent it to the Senate. We've done our job, the only body in here that's done theirs.
Osun State Deputy Governor Kola Adewusi has called for more collaboration towards the promotion of table tennis sports in the state. The Deputy Governor, who spoke at the third edition of the Michael and Felicia Alabi Memorial Table Tennis Festival, said promoting table tennis will greatly benefit sports development in Osun State. On their part, Chairman of Osun State Table Tennis, Ayo Alabi, and his wife Temidayo Alabi, urged a shift of focus from only football to table tennis. They also commended Governor Ademola Adeleke's support for the game. A total of 28 states are participating in a 3-day tournament.
Sport is a unifying factor. Be you APGA, be you APC, be you NPP, PDP, APC, it doesn't really matter. And I'll tell you a short story. When I was ranked for the local government chairmanship of my place in 2002, I organized a soccer competition.
of us focus on football, and if you look around the nation, this is the other game that everyone is familiar with, and we are seeing that a whole lot of people are turning to the game of table tennis, so that we are bringing the youth in, so that the youth can have instead of free time of going around causing mayhem, they can come around and start playing the game of table tennis.
Absolutely. Hopefully next year, people who love sports, people who love to have a corporate social responsibility, people who like to give back to the community should look at the cause, look at the people that are going to be benefiting from the sponsorship and come around, join us and sponsor us as well too. It's a good cause, it's for humanity, and it's for people with passion in table tennis and bringing up the...
Kenya, Tanzania and Uganda have launched a joint bid for the 2027 Africa Cup of Nations, which would bring the continental showpiece to East Africa for the first time. The African Football Confederation today acknowledged having received a declaration of interest from the three countries, along with bids from Algeria, Botswana and Egypt. The Kenyan government in December approved a cabinet proposal to back a bid for the biennial tournament alongside two of its neighbors. The government said a successful bid would help the national football team Harambee Stars achieve the target of qualifying for the World Cup for the first time in 2030. Kenya has twice won the right to stage continental tournament finals, the Africa Cup of Nations in 1996 and the African Nations Championships CHAN in 2018, but both times were stripped of hosting rights due to lack of internationally approved stadiums. CAF will name the winning bid in September along with new venue for the 2025 tournament after the original host, Guinea, was stripped of the right to host the event last October. Liverpool defender Trent Alexander-Arnold has launched a new initiative today to support former academy players who do not make it as professional footballers. Tagged the After Academy, the scheme, run in conjunction with the Professional Footballers Association, will partner with companies to provide job opportunities for former academy players who will be supported throughout the application process. Alexander-Arnold is funding the project personally for the next 5 years. The Premier League issued new guidance this season stating that all club academies should provide a 3-year aftercare plan for every player that is let go between the under-17 and under-21 age ranges.
I think I've seen it up close and personal in my own eyes, and I know that it's something that goes on at every club, and I think just for a little bit too long it's just been branded as, oh, that's football, that's what happens, players get released, but in fact it shouldn't just be that. There needs to be support behind them. They need to be given a second chance, opportunities, and a pathway to success in a different capacity. I've got friends, I've got players who, you know, have reached out to me to speak about it, and you know, probably the most common trait is just that feeling of rejection, of failure, of, you know, not being worthy of anything anymore, because they put everything into this, and you know, to then be told, look, you're not good enough, or for whatever reason it is, you're getting released, is, you know, scarring to them, and it lasts with them for a long time. So it's just about, for me, giving that encouragement, getting that confidence back as soon as possible, to then go and make something of themselves as quick as they can.
Well, that's all at this hour. But before we go, here is a recap of our major stories. The National Economic Council has suspended a planned removal of subsidy on petroleum products by the end of President Muhammadu Buhari's administration. And here in Osun State, the High Court in Osogbo, presided over by Justice Oyebola Ojo, has reserved judgment in the case of Hilton Hotel owner Rahman Adedoyin and 6 staff over alleged murder of master students of Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, Timothy Adegoke. The chairperson of Nigeria's in Diaspora Commission, Abike Dabirerewa, says the first batch of stranded Nigerians evacuated from Sudan will arrive in Abuja tomorrow. And on the foreign scene, we told you that the Sudanese army attacked paramilitaries in the capital Khartoum with airstrikes today, while deadly fighting fled in Darfur as a fragile U.S. brokered ceasefire entered its final hours. But please do follow us on our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Western Spring Television. You can also watch us live on our YouTube channel at Western Spring Television. My name is Femi Olanikwekun. Thank you so much for watching. Good evening.